Good morning. Oh, geez. Thanks, guys. I haven't seen some of you in a long time, and it's really good to see you. It's really good to see a lot of you. So, anyways, 18 years ago, I moved away. We moved away, Sarah and I. We thought we were going to plant a church, and we ended up doing something else. God took us on this really interesting adventure, I'll call it. So, like Tim said, what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to share part of a story, and I'm going to share part of a sermon. So we're going to have a sermon story. Hopefully we'll have some fun and maybe hear from God. We'll see. A little bit about myself. We've got 4 kids, 3 daughters, 1 son. And our oldest is 20, and it trickles all the way down to our son who's 10. Kids are growing up. My daughter actually just moved back to Grand Junction. It's fun watching them grow up. But when they're little, it's amazing the things that you watch your kids do. And every one of us has seen that. I took my kids to the park one morning, relaxing. It's the weekend. All right. And at our park, we have this big climbing rock in Gunnison that everyone goes and climbs up on. We call it Elephant Butt Park because the rock looks like an elephant butt. And what a great sculpture, right? Climb on that. So I look over, and my son immediately climbed right to the top of the rock. And the problem is his pants are around his ankles. And he's standing on the edge of the rock going for distance. And I'm so far away, there's literally nothing I can do about it. The bigger problem was one of my daughters was standing beneath the rock. And all of a sudden, she's going, Hunter! Because she got misted on. So now I am running to the rock. Put your pants on. Stop doing that. Get an umbrella. Why? And the hardest part was right next to the rock was this circle of chairs and a cooler and tables and flowers. They're having a baby shower. What do you do? I was just like, I'm so sorry and good luck, because that's what's going to happen. They're cute, they cry, and then they pee off rocks onto each other. And that's children, right? That's life. I thought it was this great example, though, of what life is like. Here we are, we're going along, and life is great, and it's sunny, and it's awesome, and it's perfect, and then the rain cloud of misfortune just comes right in on us. Changes everything, right? Changes our direction, our purpose, our flow. The sunshine is gone, and the rain cloud of misfortune is here. We live in this world that is relatively unkind to us at times. Every person in this room has experienced that. Some of us have experienced things that in an instant, in a moment, hurt so deep, you couldn't even muster an emotion other than sickness in your gut and your soul. This heavy, that's all your body could produce. What do you do when that happens? What do we do when that's the position that we're stuck in? But it happens to us all the time. It happens to people that we work with. It happens to people that we're around. We live in this broken world where imperfect people, us included, have an impact on each other. And it hurts sometimes. It's hard. My wife, when we were younger, when we just had 2 kids, we were pregnant with our 3rd child. And she goes to bed, and I stay up for another 30 minutes, just kind of relax a little bit, have some decompression time. And she comes back like 10 minutes later. And if any of you have been through something like this or an event of some sort, you know what it looks like when you look at your spouse and you know something's terribly wrong. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You can see it. And I looked at Sarah, and I was like, oh, God, something is bad. And so I of course, I get up, and I start moving towards her, and she shakes her head, and she goes, I think I just lost a baby. And that's this really hard thing to experience as a parent and as a dad and as a husband. There's a pain that, if you've walked through it, you get. If you've watched a child suffer, it's a pain that you get. Now, it's different for me because I'm a dad, and so I have my dad hurt, and I have my husband hurt, and I'm her brother in Christ hurt. I got all this different hurt, right? There's a lot of hurt, but it doesn't compare to the type of hurt that she went through. And if you're a mother, if you're a mom, You know what I'm talking about when you've been through, or you know someone who's been through a situation like that. And here's why I'm sharing that story, because I think it's really relevant to how the Father feels pain for us. And I want to talk about that because I was at lunch a couple weeks ago with a friend, and this friend has been through hell. He just lost his dad. He just lost his brother. Everything that could fall apart is falling apart. It's a terrible situation. He goes to a different church. It's a church that uses the Bible. They use the word Christian. They use the word Jesus, but their theology is completely opposite. It's just a word that we use, and so their hope in eternity is actually very different than your and I's is. And he made a comment to me that struck a chord that really frustrated me. He said, Jake, I wish God knew what it was like to feel our pain. And when he said that, I was like, no, you're wrong. He does. He knows. He knows your pain better than you know your pain. It frustrated me. And it frustrated me because in that moment, there's this belief that goes around in the world that wants to devalue the gospel. It wants to dehumanize what happened for you and I on the cross, to cheapen it, to lessen it, to make us think that the Father doesn't understand our sorrow or our hurt or our pain. The world has worked really, really, really hard. Every institution we're at, places we go, what you hear on TV, what you see on the smartphone, what people are talking about, there is a theme that really wants to make a clear separation between a relationship with a living God that wants to be very, very, very relevant in our lives and turns it into a God of distance, that God is there and we're here. Yes, we believe in God and all these things are true, but there is a distance, there is a separation, and the world has worked really hard to make that clear, but what if that's not true? Hebrews 4:15 and 16 says, this high priest of ours understands our weakness, for he faced all the same temptations we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious Father. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it. I have a lot of friends. I have some friends that have experienced some pain. I have some friends that are experiencing a lifetime of pain, of affliction, some of them. And some of those people are actually the happiest people I know. And the only reason why is because those people have allowed something to shift in their soul where it's about God and it's not about them. And it's something that can't be explained, and we're going to learn about it here in a minute in John 3. We're going to learn about this worldly understanding versus heavenly understanding. The thing that bothered me is a lot of people believe that God is not the God of the here and now, that he is not relevant, and that's not true. And we're going to learn about it today. That God does want to get involved. He wants to be a very heavy part of our lives. Do you guys remember when COVID happened? That was a party. We had traffic directions in the grocery store. I can't touch that. God, don't look. Got plastic on the... It was chaos. There was all this information back and forth. What's true, what's not. Get a shot, don't get a shot. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Social distance. Our neighbor lady was going for a walk, and we're way out in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody. She's like 50 feet away, and she's like, I'm turning. We're like, okay. It was weird. It was hard to know what's going on, right? Well, Lauren Daigle had this great comment. And if you guys know who she is, she's an artist. She goes, life is hard right now. Imagine us doing this without God. My God, what a great comment. Life's hard. Imagine doing it without God. And we'll look at a verse here in John 16:33. And we actually talked about this a little bit during communion. Jesus is actually in the upper room with his disciples. His disciples are also those who are closest to him. They're his best friends. They're his confidants. They're Jesus' closest companions. And they're actually having communion, and he's like, I'm actually going to tell you right now, one of you is going to betray me. In fact, you just dipped your bread in the cup with me. And the person who betrayed Jesus was like, nah, not me, Lord, because it didn't happen yet. And that's how that actually works. See, our greatest hurts and our greatest pains and afflictions and crises usually come from the people that we're closest to. And it's those betrayals that are really, really hard. But Jesus went on to say, after he called out his friend, he said this in verse 33, I have told you these things so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. So how do we do that? How do we navigate crisis? Now here's why I'm here. Tim asked me to share a story. I shared it publicly for the first time last night and this morning. And it's not a proud moment. It's actually a difficult moment, but we're going to talk about it. And I got to give you a little bit of understanding behind what's going on. And I'm going to give you guys the short version. Is that okay? So the last 18 years, I've worked underground in a gold mine, gold and silver. I've been from the miner to now the general manager. I've been through lots of different owners. It's a very expensive business. So our business runs 24/7. It doesn't stop. And if you're in charge of something like that, you know what I'm talking about. 24/7 is a hard cycle. About 94 employees you got to keep up with. In a 24-hour period, we'll typically advance 40 feet of rock. We'll make 40 feet of tunnel. Our cost, depending on, the economy and fuel and all that, is around $1,500 a foot to advance tunnel. So costs can build up relatively quick, but they're supposed to get offset because it's a gold mine, right? Sometimes that doesn't always happen. The tunnels are 15 by 15. They're big, almost the height of our ceiling here, maybe the bottom of these steel rafters. Through the course of the last 8 years, I'd become very close with one of my business partners. Close enough to the point that I started doing things that I knew I shouldn't be doing, like signing personal guarantees. See, they were from out of country, and I'm from in country, and they don't have Social Security numbers, so they can't sign certain guarantees. So I ended up doing it. And when I would do it, I'd be like, you realize I'm putting my neck on the line for you, right? Man, don't worry, we got you. We will never let anything happen to you. And I believed it because over the course of years, they've always come through with every penny. Our children were close with each other. We did a lot of trips together. This was someone I was really close with. And so I accidentally let trust overrule the authority of Scripture in my life. Proverbs 6, we all know that. You don't co-sign. Don't do that. Bad things happen when you do. You're putting your neck out there for someone else, for another person who's flawed. That's a dangerous place to be, and I was in a dangerous spot. Well, 4 years ago, I start to watch some of our debts rack up, and those debts can rack up really quick when you're at $1 million a month. It's really fast, so the clock is spinning. And all of a sudden, I look, and we're around $1.8 million in debt, and my partner comes to me, and he's like, we're out of money. We got to shut this thing down. You're all laid off. Me, my wife, and 94 other people. In one moment, we lose our jobs. Like, okay, all right. These debts are going to get fixed. These debts are going to... And I'm looking at this number that's glaring me in the face that I'm personally responsible for, that I didn't spend a penny of. And I'm going, this is really difficult, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Because if it's not okay, that's a big, scary number, and I got to deal with that. My partner and friend comes to me, and he goes, sorry, man, you're just going to have to file bankruptcy. And he left the country. And all of a sudden, I realized that I am standing there now holding the bag on a debt I cannot pay. I want you to think about that for a minute. How do you break that news to your spouse? Hey, hon, so remember how you wanted to move? Hey, babe, remember when you said for richer or poorer? How do you tell I can tell you this right now, if your spouse, if you guys are Home Depot and she likes that $3.50 a square foot tile, buy it. That's cheap. That's not $1,500 a square foot. Buy that thing. But it's a really interesting spot when all of a sudden you have to try to explain to your spouse that you allowed something like that to happen. Where honestly and truly, from all logical aspects, your only option is actually to file bankruptcy. Because if you think about it, for most people, to take every single bit of everything you have and cash liquidate it, it's really hard to come up with $2.5 million cash. There's mortgages on your house, cars, stuff that you might have, toys, whatever that might be. But to just manifest $2.5 million in cash is a difficult ask for most people. And for little old Jake, that was a tough ask. In fact, it was far beyond my ability. So I actually spent the next 9 months working with all of these different companies trying to get debts made and fixed, getting products returned. I didn't get a paycheck for 9 months. I had a full-time job fighting creditors. From 8 to 5, every single day, Monday through Friday, it was game on. And these people were cutthroat and ruthless. Some companies were $450,000, one was $500,000, one was $330,000, and just on and on and on. 66 different companies. Big debts. And one of these companies is one of the biggest companies in the world in their industry. I actually became on a first name basis with a lot of CFOs and CEOs of really big companies because the debts were so big, they actually wanted to know what goofy kid would rack up such a debt like that against them. And I actually started to use words and language like this. Do you think I woke up this morning and went, let's mess with this company? It's a multi-billion-dollar company. Let's have some fun. No, it doesn't work like that. We know that, right? But as a guy, I'm in my situation, and I'm trying really hard to fix my situation, and it's working. Over the course of 9 months, we knock that debt down. Me and another guy, we knock it down from $2.5 million to like 1.6. And I've completely exhausted everything that I have and that I am. I've isolated myself. I'm alone. There's very, very, very few people that I'm talking to about this, and do you know why? Because I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed about what I put my wife into, what I put my children into. I've always been smart financially, and I've always been a really, really hard worker. And all of a sudden, I put my family in a hole that they didn't deserve. I didn't ask for it. But here we are. I am dealt with this thing. What do I do with what's been put in front of me? I remember our kids going, hey, Dad, the sheriff's coming up the driveway. Oh, I know what it's for. I actually did in the back of my head know what it's for because one of these accounts was getting really ugly. If you've ever been chased by a creditor, which I never have, it's an interesting feeling. This was the first time in my life. So my wife and I go to the door, and it's a deputy that I'm really good friends with. And I'm like, you want to come in? And he's like, I can't, Jake. I just got to give you these papers. Okay, big, thick packet. All right, court order, court appearance in front of a jury of my peers. My wife starts laughing because she thinks he's coming to give us bad news about our daughter, who at the time wasn't making some good choices, and we thought he was coming to tell us that she was in a worse way. No, he was just coming to give me a court summons. So she starts laughing, and I kind of giggle a little bit because I knew this was coming. 2 days before, I got to tell you this, be careful what you say out loud. Because 2 evenings before, I was on a rant to my spouse. Your guys' spouse ever rant to you? Oh, yeah. Like, everyone's like, yeah, I wish he had a different sounding board. So I'm making a rant to my spouse, and I'm like, they just need to put me in front of a jury. I didn't spend this money. Here's your jury summons. Okay, let's see if it works that way. Does it work the other way? I wish I had a big bag of cash. That didn't happen. But it was interesting how all of this stuff started coming together. But I got to tell you, I can't go into the depths of the darkness and the shame and the regret that I was going through as a man, as a husband, as a provider. The I went through 2 months when this all first went down where I don't think I slept hardly at all. I was so angry. I was so angry that the people that did this to me, I was so mad that they would do this to a young family, that this could even happen. And one of the things that I really got hung up on was I'm a good person. I've always done right by others. I've always gone out of my way. How could something like this happen? How could this happen? How can bad things happen to good people? Have you ever had that thought? Yeah, we've seen it. We've heard people say it. How could this happen? Seen it. You guys remember, let's go back from COVID. Do you remember Y2K? Oh my gosh. What an experience. So for those of us that went through Y2K when COVID hit, you were like, no problem. It's a pandemic. No big deal. I remember at Y2K, I was watching this dude come out of Walmart with 6 cases of toilet paper. I was like, that guy's an idiot. You can't eat that. And then I realized a little bit later that guy was a genius. And we all saw that play out in COVID. We stopped shopping in the toilet paper aisle. Now people are in the napkin aisle. Hey, Bob, that's a lot of cat litter. What are you doing? Use what you got. It doesn't matter if it's $2.50 or if it's $2.5 million. When it's betrayed on you, it hurts. And it hurts because it's betrayal. And betrayal usually comes from those that are really, really close to us. And the part about that betrayal was it all started through half-truths. See, if the enemy can make us have a disconnect with God, then his foot is in the door. And once his foot is in the door, we can be derailed and distracted and be overcome with noise that we completely miss out on what God is actually trying to do in our lives. One of the things that I've learned, I've got a few businesses. Some of them we cover a few different states and we kind of move all over. But one of the things that I've learned in business that is really, really true is something far more dangerous than a blatant lie is a half-truth. And the reason why is a half-truth is really deceptive. It makes you think everything's great when it's actually not. Oh, everything's fine, said the people on the Titanic. It's not. But those half-truths are really, really, really misleading. They're deceptive. When your spouse says, hey, how does this look on me? Do you tell them the truth or is it a half-truth? What's the right answer there? You want to have a strong marriage? No half-truths. And that's easier said than done. You want to have a strong organization? You want to have a strong church? You want to have a strong business? Make sure there is no space in there for half-truths. I've watched half-truths in business cost millions and millions of dollars and years in progress delayed. Heartache, turmoil, that's just on the business side. Think about it inside of a marriage. Think about that inside of maybe a church or an organization. Detrimental. Half-truths are so deceptive, and deception hurts. See, the half-truth becomes that disconnect reason for us. My reason for why I'm going to be just a little bit disconnected from God. I believe, but I'm all in except. How many marriages are struggling right now because of those half-truths? How many organizations and churches, how many people in the world and in America are struggling because you turn on the news? Is it true or is it half true? Or is it partially true? It's a struggle. We got to navigate all this noise and all these sayings. Misfortune and half-truth can blind us from the goodness of God. It blinds us from the fact that he hurts with us. And he actually wants to do something about the situation that we're in. What if our greatest tragedy was actually our greatest opportunity? What if the thing that was actually the very, very worst in our life became the very, very best? Well, that's only plausible through a kingdom principle. It doesn't happen any other way. because now you're in the realm of miracles and things like that. But what if? What if your worst thing actually becomes that moment where God intervenes in your life in a way that you've never seen before? And in the midst of your pain, you're actually going, hallelujah. Thank you, God. If I back up to what happened with my wife when she lost that baby, 2 years after that event, my wife had our third daughter. And 2 years after that, she had our one son, our fourth child. See, that's not betrayal from God, that's blessing. But we get them confused, and sometimes we get so caught up on the betrayal or the hurt or the half-truth or the crisis or the situation or the hole that we're in that we forget that God does have blessing. We just don't know what it looks like. And so we try to grab onto what's tangible because that's easy and it's right there. I got a lot of lawyers. I have several that I work with. Most of them are they're like lawyers. And if you're a lawyer, I love you. I just want to say that. Don't sue me. Most lawyers in a situation like that, because we live in a world that something bad happens, what do you got to have? You got to have justice. A crime was committed, there's got to be some justice. Now I feel better. And the same thing happens in us when it's personal. Something bad has happened. Now what? And so when you're in a situation like mine, the very first thing that comes to your mind is justice, retribution. How do I make this right? This isn't fair. It's got to be fixed. So I could have gone to most lawyers and said, what do I do? I could lay out the debts. I could lay it all out. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, we're going to sue this guy. We're going to put an injunction here. We're going to put liens on all of that. We're going to file motions. And, oh, yeah, we're going to tear this up in paperwork and litigation. We're going to tie this thing up. It's going to be nasty. And we're going to start you a GoFundMe page. That's what the average lawyer would say, right? So I go to my lawyer, who's a Christian. Great advice I'm going to get. He's going to use the Bible. By the way, his one eye doesn't work, so he wears a patch. So my Christian pirate lawyer, Sarah and I go in to see him, and I lay out everything before him. And he's very involved with my company, so he knows what's going on. And I lay it all out. And he goes, yeah, you're fine. God's got this. I'm like, no, didn't you hear what I just said? And he's like, yeah, you're fine. God's got this. Yeah, that's compounded debt. That's terrible. I am not jealous of you at all. I am so glad I am not in your shoes. And I'm like, this is the worst legal advice I've ever paid for. He's like, I'm doing this for free. Christians. Do you know why he told me that? Because he knew I was a believer. And he knew I believed in a much deeper realm than what we can hear and see physically. He knew that I believed in a realm of the impossible. And he wanted to make it very simple for me. God's got this. And I wanted to argue with him, but he kept coming back. God's got this. You just watch what happens. It's going to get ugly. You're going to get sued. You're going to get injunctions put on you. You're going to be deposed. Your life is going to be miserable. God's got this. Okay. You know, what's interesting about my lawyer friend is when we met, he was a police officer. And then he decided that wasn't the best way to help, so he became a lawyer. And then after doing law for the last 10 years, he realized, I got to be a pastor. In October, he's becoming a full-time pastor. And the reason why is he sat with so many people where he got to give them legal advice according to the worldly way, and he got to give certain people kingdom advice, biblical advice, and he got to see it play out. And something clicked for him where he went, that's it. That's where it's at. That's where my place is. So what do we do when we're confronted with crisis? Do we go to lawyer number one or do we go to lawyer number two? What's our response? I want to look in John 3, verse 22 through 33. And to set the stage, John the Baptist is here at this river, and he's baptizing, and Jesus and his disciples are actually now on the other side of the river, and they're now baptizing. So there's all this different stuff going on. And John the Baptist's disciples have some comments to say. So starting in verse 22. Afterward, or then, Jesus and his disciples left Jerusalem and went into the Judean countryside. Jesus spent some time there with them, baptizing people. At this time, John the Baptist was baptizing at Enon near Salim, because there was plenty of water there, and people kept coming to him for baptism. This was before John was thrown into prison. Something really bad is happening. I'd call that negative. If we keep reading, a debate broke out between John's disciples and a certain Jew over ceremonial cleansing. I want to pause real quick at verse 25, and I just got to point this out. This passage doesn't say anything else about this feller who had popped up out of the middle of nowhere and was causing debate and issue. Doesn't say another word. All we hear is, here's two different groups of people, Jesus and John the Baptist, baptizing people. God is moving, good things are happening, and we got a guy over here that's quarreling. And it's a theme that we see again and again in the Bible. When Jesus is before Pilate, he's actually being held to account. And the Pharisees and the religious leaders are trying to bring accusations against him, and they can't. So they're trying to find someone to bring an accusation. They can't. So they finally stir up the crowds to where the crowds are saying, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Where now they're pleading for Jesus' crucifixion and the release and freedom for Barabbas, a murderer. Because the crowd got stirred up. You read it again in Acts 17 when Paul and Silas are in Thessalonica, and it says they're in the synagogue for 3 Sabbaths or 3 weeks, persuading the people there about the kingdom of God. And it says people begin to believe. You can read about this in Acts 17. In fact, God was moving in such a way that it says in the scriptures that the religious leaders became jealous. They intentionally went out, and they actually used these words. They found some worthless fellows. Another translation says scoundrels. My translation says dirtbags. It says they go and they find some worthless fellows to start a riot. Every time you see the move of God in your life or the move of God in an organization, you're going to see things rise up against it. We see that playing out in our society right now. People trying to speak truth and being silenced. Right? Things like that. So I want to keep going through this passage. What's going on here? What's really going on? That was just noise. John's disciples came to him and said, "Teacher, the man you met on the other side of the Jordan River, the one you said was the Messiah, is also baptizing people. And everybody is going to him instead of coming to us. It is the bridegroom who marries the bride. And the bridegroom's friend is simply glad to stand with him and hear his vows. Therefore, I am filled with joy at his success." This is what John says. And then John in John 3:30, this is one of the very first verses I committed to memory when I was a new believer. And I think it should be a creed that we live by as believers. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. That's what John says about Jesus. He must become greater, I must become less. He has come from above and is greater than anyone else. We are of the earth, and we speak of earthly things. But he comes from heaven and is greater than anyone else. He testifies about what he has seen and heard. But how few believe what he tells them. Anyone who accepts his testimony can affirm that God is true. And at the end of this, what John is saying is, look, he understands on a whole different level than we do. Our earthly understanding is very limited. That's why we must become less and less, and he must become greater. God must increase, and I must decrease. That is how we overcome. You see, when we don't allow God to increase in our lives and ourselves to decrease, what we do is we surrender ourselves and our situation to the mundane. We surrender everything in our life to simply the plausible, that which can happen. What if we live in a way where we actually see more of the miraculous than the normal? I want to talk a few things about that because I have more of this story that I got to talk about. We're not done with it. But how can we see God in the middle of crisis? I think one of the things we got to remember is that tribulation seeks to disconnect us from God, and then counter tribulation with thankfulness. Life is tough. Be thankful. There's a spiritual dynamic that happens there. There was a gal named Naomi in Brooklyn. Naomi was an incredible baker. She made the best Christmas sugar cookie on the planet. It was so good that all of her friends would ask for the recipe. What's the recipe? And she would always say, I'm not giving it to you. It's my secret. Anyone in here who's a baker knows how secret recipes are, right? She would never give it out. And she finally was like, I'm not giving it to you over my dead body. Over my dead body, you will never get my recipe. When Naomi passed away, her husband and his daughters did something on Naomi's tombstone. On the backside of her tombstone, they put this. Over my dead body. We're just going to pause while you guys take notes. If anyone actually makes those, will you please save one for me? I really want to try one. Why did they do that? It was a sense of healing. This is a terrible situation. We just lost someone we love dearly. What are we going to do? We're going to rejoice. We're going to make light and have fun with something that she even brought up. We're going to bring healing into our situation with happiness, with thankfulness, with goodness. Most of you have probably heard the phrase, if we're not laughing, we're crying, right? And some of us have held on to that very, very dearly. If we're not laughing, we're crying. I worked for 12 years with the State Patrol as a chaplain and still do it for our fire department in Gunnison. First responders, you'll hear these people on scenes that are the worst. There's a theme. And one of the ways that they deal with crisis, critical incident stress management, is laughter over pain. Joke or black humor sometimes over the awful situation. But if we're not laughing, we're crying. Colossians 3:15 says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful. We're actually called to peace. Jesus promised that hard times are going to come, but he said, have peace, because remember, I've overcome the world. Who would have known that if we're not laughing, we're crying was a bit of a kingdom principle? So here's the rest of the story, as much as I can share right now. This is the part that I don't understand. Actually, I don't understand a lot of it, but this one I really don't understand. I've never actually shared any of this until it started last night, this morning, because I don't know what God is doing with this. I know what he did then, and I know what he's doing down the road, but there's so much more, and I'm still trying to just wrap my head around it as much as I can. I'm at the mine, and one of the missions that I have for the day is I've got to go and get this 4,500-pound fan and return it to the creditor so I can get some of that money knocked down. It's a worthy cause. We're going to do it. So I got a couple of guys that are going to come up and help me. So these fans, just so you know, this one weighs 4,500 pounds, just the fan alone. It's a 100-horsepower fan. It will suck your clothes off if you walk by it. We have to put big grids on it so it doesn't pull you in. They're a jet engine. We use these big 48-inch mufflers to silence and help dampen the sound, so you can even work in the vicinity of these things. They're monsters, and some people actually in here know what I'm talking about. Well, this fan is bolted to the back, and the back is actually what we call the ceiling. Okay, so you got your back and your rib, your floor. So it's bolted to the back or the ceilings, about 15 feet in the air, the bottom of these rafters, and it's bolted to the ceiling with real bolts, like man bolts, not Home Depot bolts. We're talking bolts. We use bolts from 2 feet all the way up to 30 feet, 100 feet if we want to. We can keep going forever. But in this situation, I'm using split set bolts. They're 6-foot bolts, and each one of these, they're rated for 20 tons each. You can hang a tank from this, and it wouldn't fall off. So this fan is bolted to the ceiling, and there's these chain anchors that are holding it in place with 1/2-inch grade 8 chain cradled underneath the fan. And so what I've got to do is I've got to get this fan down and get it up to the surface so I can get it returned. So it's an easy process. I've done a lot of this kind of stuff, right? So what do you do? Well, hey, you go get the loader. I want you to come up underneath this. You're going to put the bucket underneath the fan. We're going to scoop onto it. As soon as you have the load picked up, I'm going to unscrew these bolts. You got the fan off the surface. Here we go. So he goes around the corner to get the loader. The other guy, I say, hey, you step to the side over here because I don't, just in case something goes wrong. I get my big steel ladder. It's made out of 1/4-inch iron. We have to hand make our ladders out of iron because rocks and stuff fall on them, and so they're heavy. aluminum ladders would just fall apart. So I get up and I'm on the top of this fan and I'm looking and all right, I get the electrical disconnected and I start moving everything and I'm looking at the chains. That's all locked in secure. That's secure. Okay. And then the tails of the chain, they're just hanging. So they took a piece of wire and tied the two tails together so they don't get sucked in the fan. Because that fan would pull those big heavy chains right in and shred the blades. It's happened more than once. So I look at everything looks fine, and I reach out and I grab that wire and I start to bend it. And in that instant, everything dropped to the ground. The fans, the silencers, the piping, all of the stuff, the chain, me, the ladder. But here's the part that I can't explain. Is for a moment, in the darkness, in the middle of this mountain, I'm half a mile in, half a mile beneath the surface of the earth. For a moment, I just float. And I can't explain that. And then I don't just float, but I set to the ground. And I set to the ground, my foot goes in this ladder rung and in between this ladder rung, and the pipe, the fan, the stuff is boiling around me. The fan has actually crushed the pipes. They're bending and bouncing up. Like, it's chaos. And I'm just standing there. And I'm standing there holding this wire. This piece of 9 wire apparently was holding it all up. Thousands of pounds. And it was just, I didn't untie it. I just bent it. It should not have happened. I cannot explain it. But I was in shock, and this thing was actually froze in my hand. This is actually from a different thing. This is different, just so you know. This is from a youth group wrestling accident 30 years ago. Thank you, Jesus. Finally got it fixed. But I'm holding this thing because I'm in shock. Now, the big guy that works for me, he's over in the corner, and he's screaming. Ah! And I'll church up what he says to this. He says, holy smokes, holy smokes, holy smokes. And he's seen a lot. He's actually on the mine rescue team with me. Like, we train and go do some crazy stuff. He's seen some stuff. And he's freaking out. And then he comes running over and he goes, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm fine. Why? And he goes, dude, you just floated in the air. You were there. And then you just sat down. And I literally remember going, huh. Because that's what I felt too. But I thought I was crazy. Still have this. I threw this in my bucket of tools and ended up in the garage. I don't even know why I still have it. I have it hanging up there, and I look at it every now and then, just so I can have a conversation with God. Okay. You just floated there for a minute. What? I'm in the middle of the earth. Nobody knows I'm there. How do you pinpoint down a laser beam? Oh, we got an emergency coming. Catch that guy. How does that happen? Explain that. You can't. It's a bizarre feeling. But what I remember was this. See, at the time, I was 9 months into this thing. I was so down. I was tired. I was wore out. I was depressed. Guys, I was my own worst enemy. I'd beat myself ruthlessly. I'd guilted myself. I had devalued who I was in Christ to the point that I figured this was it. And as I'm driving home that day, I'm covered in sludge. I'm tired. And I look over at this mountain that I've lived in for the last 18 years. Feeling low, lower than I've probably ever felt, minus one other time. And I heard God say this, I am not done with you yet. And it was in that moment where I went, okay. Everything's going to be okay because God is not done with me yet. I got to tell you something. If there is breath in your lungs, God is not done with you yet. Your story is not finished if there is breath in your lungs. Our understanding is really limited on earth. And God's understanding is of a heavenly realm that we cannot explain. A suggestion for all of us is one of the things we probably all need, the problems that we have in our life, whatever, how big or however small it is, your problem needs less of you and more of God. Your situation needs God to increase and you to decrease. It took me 9 months to get to the point where I could actually finally do that because I wanted to fix my problem. One last point. Diligently present your discomforts before the Lord and focus on His truths. When crisis is real and it's imminent, you got to do one thing. You got to push out all the noise, all the half-truths, all the lies, all the things that are trying to distract you, and you got to focus on one thing, and that's absolute truths. It is the only thing. But see, we're surrounded with smartphones and news media and friends and platforms and chat this, and it's overwhelming. How do you turn off all that noise? How do you do that? So what happens is you got anxiety that just comes in like crazy. Friends, when anxiety's coming in like a fire hose, it's got to be going out like a fire hose. When crisis is that bad, it's got to be coming out of you, boiling out of you, seeking truth, you expressing yourself to God and watching what happens. And Paul even said that in Philippians 4, 6, and 7. He said, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. That's a recipe right there for success. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He's done. Is it that simple? Yeah, I think we overcomplicate stuff sometimes. If you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than the human mind can understand. And you got to remember who Paul's talking to. He's talking to the church in Philippi. These people a majority of them are retired Roman soldiers. A bunch of dudes, some dudettes, with PTSD. People that have experienced crisis, trauma, pain, misery. Some of them are probably missing limbs and appendages and eyes, and they've been through it. And Paul says, be thankful. Remember what God has done for you. Be thankful. Life's tough. Be thankful. Practice that. See what happens. So I'm going on a drive with my kids. Years ago, they're all little, and they're in the age of chicken crossing the road jokes. You guys know those? There's a bajillion of them. And Zoe, our second daughter, she pipes up and she's like fourth grade. So cute. She's like, how come the toilet paper couldn't cross the road? I'm like, I don't know, Zoe, why? And she goes, because it got stuck in a crack. And she had her little girl giggle. And it was so funny because it was so true. But she's giggling about it. She said, you get it? The crack? Like, yeah, we get it. Thanks. Been around the block. But that's life. Life is full of cracks. Life genuinely is. Sometimes the toilet paper doesn't make it across the road because there's voids that we fall into and issues. A friend of mine said it really well, and I think I told you this. Life is what happens to us when we're on the way of doing something else. Those cracks, those voids, the things that we didn't plan for. That's real life. Now you're actually living. It's the things you didn't foresee because now you're actually forced to trust God. Something happened to me the morning that fan fell to the ground, the day I should have been smashed flat, and I still can't explain. I was on my knees every morning through all of that. I was seeking God. I was reading my Bible. I was praying. I've never worshiped more driving to and from the mine in my pickup than I had then. Hard moments, hard conversations with God. But that morning, I did something different because for me, my only hope in this entire thing was to file bankruptcy. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to lose everything I'd worked for. So I worked as much as I could to not have to do that. And it finally came to the point where there is no other option. And I was on my knees that morning, and I finally said, God, it's yours. You give and you take away. This house is yours. Take it. Everything I've got is yours. God, you've given it to me. It's yours. I know and I believe that you'll actually restore One day, because I know what the scriptures say, you'll restore what the locusts have eaten. That's the business that God is in. God, I give it all to you. I'm going to have the worship team come up. We're going to close out. And something happened that day when I was on my face and I took the inevitable pain that I was looking at, and I said to the point of difficulty that I surrender it to you. I give it all to you. And I don't think much of it. I gear up, grab my stuff, and I start driving to the mine. And I'm on my way, and I'm going through my, my mental checklist and all of that, and what I got to do. I got to get this fan. Going through all my steps, I try to. Once you get underground, it's hard to get back out, so you got to do a lot of pre-planning. And I'm doing all that, and my mind is occupied, and my phone rings. And I look at my phone, and it's an MSHA inspector. And like, oh God, more chaos. See, MSHA is not my friend. For those of you who don't know who MSHA is OSHA on steroids. MSHA is a very, very big part of my life. Safety, 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 safety. They are there all the time. Regulate, citations. They're not kind. They're actually some of the most wonderful people I know. But in the business side of things, they're not kind. They're not gracious. If there's something wrong, you're in trouble. And so I'm expecting something awful, like, oh God, another thing. Okay. And he goes, hey, Jake, how you doing? I was like, I'm doing all right. How are you? He's like, good. He goes, hey, I got a weird question for you. I was like, okay, shoot. Try, because I don't know what he's going to talk about. And he goes, do you need $5,000? Sucked up my pride. Nope, I'm good. Thank you, though. It was very nice of you to offer. And he persists. He goes, no, I'm going to tell you something really weird. God just told me to give you $5,000. I literally am like on the highway. My children had been eating out of our food COVID stash supply. We'd been eating rice and beans and anything else we could get. I didn't have money. And this guy's calling to give me $5,000. The morning I surrendered everything started to change. That was the morning. The first thing God had to do was shock me just enough. He had to remind me to wake up just a little bit. Jake, I'm not done with you yet. Now you're going to see me work in your situation. It didn't stop. This was 4 years ago. Not too long after, I looked down my driveway. Here comes another truck full of food for my family. And one guy brought me a 12-pack of beer. That was an exciting moment. It's the best beer I ever had. I had friends, 66 companies that I owed money to. Some of them were local. People that I owed thousands and thousands of dollars to. Not money I spent, but they understood my situation. I can tell you 3 different people in random times who called me and said, I want you to come see me. And I was like, all right. And I went to see them to go, I'm working on it. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And one in particular, a woman, she gave me a check for $5,000. She goes, I want you to take your kids out, buy them a dress, do something awesome for your kids, take your wife on a date, take care of you. All of a sudden, in this moment that I surrendered, the kingdom of God came forward. And I'll say this to every person in this room, if you've ever been on that side where you're like, I think God wants me to do this, but nah, listen, because I've been on the receiving side of that and it was life-changing. Four years later, Jake has not spent another penny on these debts. 90% done. 90%. The new person that I worked for called me up and he goes, hey, I don't like what happened to you. This is a person I've only met once and I didn't know. He goes, I don't like what happened to you. I want you to know that right now I'm going to assume all of your personal guarantees. You don't even know who I am. Why would you do that? Why would somebody volunteer millions for no reason? It was in that moment that I realized that is a direct example of who Christ is. He paid a debt he didn't have to pay. But he did, because he hurts with us far more than we realize. And he wants to be involved in every little bit. It happens when we surrender. Let's stand. We're gonna close out with a little bit of a worship song. I'm gonna pray. Tim's gonna come up in a minute. Heavenly Father, for every one of us in this room right now, you see our cups. You see what we're in and what we're not in. You see the people that we know, the situations around us. Some of them are dire. We actually don't even know how certain things are going to get fixed. And right now I pray, God, that your presence would just begin to speak and to whisper into everyone's lives that you're not done with them yet, that this chapter isn't over. In fact, the best is yet to come. And that's a reminder for a lot of people in here that when you leave here today, you're going to see the goodness of God. If you will surrender absolutely everything, you're going to watch a kingdom principle happen in your life. I pray, God, for every one of us as we leave here, that we would begin to see you in the miraculous, not just the mundane. That we would see you in our pain and our hurt and our sorrow and our holes far more than we ever have. I don't know what kind of hole any of you guys are in, but God does. He knows right where you're at. I don't care how hidden you are, how far away you think you can be. He knows right where you're at. And he wants to move in that situation that you didn't think there was any hope for. He actually wants to move in that. That spot that has been so hard and dark, he wants to redeem. And if you need just a little bit of that, we're going to have the prayer team up here. We're going to worship. But if you want just a little bit, you want to poke your hand in the air, you want to say something about it, we're going to be praying with you guys. If you want to come forward, it's up to you. But what I know is God doesn't want anyone to leave here today without knowing that he is the God of the impossible. And he wants to be involved right now in every detail.